Hey, welcome back to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. I'm your host, Coach Zach. I'm here with Coach Brandy and Coach Caden. And today we are talking all about the thyroid. So sit tight because that's going to be exciting. And before we do, we want to give a shout out to a client of the week. And this week's pick goes to Brandy.
Steve Stengel.
Steve Stengel.
Shout out to Steve. Steve works super hard. He comes in. He's very consistent. He trains hard. He's so fun to train. He has the best attitude. I just love having him in the gym. I know he primarily works out in the morning, so I think you train him more than I have, Caden. But I also train his wife, Lori. She's awesome too. She started here first and finally got Steve to join. And he's been loving it and having great results. What else do you have to say about Steve?
Yeah, Steve, man, I love it. I've been seeing you. I've been watching you grow, move up in weights. Your form's increasing, man. Just keep coming in, keep showing up, and I promise we're gonna keep getting you results, man. Love you, Steve.
I love that he and Lori have like this competition with each other too, like who can do the most weight. Yep, and they're practicing for like a plank hold competition in the future. It's really cute.
Even the other day, he had like 50 pounds on a single leg for us, and he goes, "Finally using more weight than Lori."
That's awesome.
She had like a year head start on him.
Yes,
though,
she
so.
did.
Steve and Lori, we love you guys. You guys are awesome. So, okay, let's talk about the thyroid. So, all the time, I mean, it's very, very common for people to come in for consultation, and we kind of go through their history and get some, medical background on them, and hypothyroidism, super common. Hashimoto's super common. Hyperthyroidism, not so much, not nearly as common as hypothyroidism, which is hypo's, too low of a thyroid function. Hyper is too high, right? So very common to see hypothyroidism, and our clients taking medication to treat that. And so the thyroid controls your metabolism, and that's, I think, kind of why we want to talk about it today is the thyroid the thing that is preventing people from losing weight, and what role does that play? So, Brandy, you've got 6 pages of notes again. Like
always
every
count
episode.
on me to bring the notes.
You always got the notes. So, do you want to give everybody like an overview of the hormonal process, where the thyroid comes into play, what hormones are coming out of the thyroid and all that, so we have just kind of like a high level background of what it is and what it's doing.
All right. So if you're not familiar with the thyroid, it's a butterfly-shaped gland, and it sits like in your throat behind your Adam's apple, like in that area. And so the gland produces 2 hormones, T3 and T4. I'm not going to say the actual names of them because I will probably get it wrong. So if you're interested, look it up. But it's basically two hormones that are produced in that gland. And those hormones are responsible for things like metabolism, digestion, energy expenditure, also impacts your cognitive function, your mood regulation, and then sex drive.
Yeah, all kinds of functions, right? But those are the big, like, common ones, right? And so obviously if some function there is not working properly, there's going to be a negative response, right? And I think the underactive thyroid is most common, so we'll probably talk about that the most today. But what would be like if you're getting your blood work done, how would they know that your thyroid's underactive? Yeah,
so going in and having your blood work drawn is how you will know whether or not. So they'll look at T3 and T4. That would be like in your results from your blood test. That's what you would be looking at to see if you're within the normal range there. But some common like symptoms, if you are wondering if you might have a thyroid problem. So for hypothyroidism, that's the underactive thyroid where your body's not producing enough. Things like fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, a hoarse voice, dry skin, cold intolerance, puffy face and feet can be related to low thyroid, and low body temperature. So always kind of feeling cold, and then having a slower heart rate. So those are some of the main sort of symptoms that you might be dealing with if you have a low thyroid.
So if you're experiencing any of those, probably a good indication of just a warning sign that's telling you, hey, you need to go get your blood work done and check and see if there's, something going on here.
Right.
If somebody's doing all the right things from a dietary perspective, they're working out, all of that, and we're not seeing any weight loss, that's also kind of an indicator to us of, hey, you might want to go get your blood work done and let's just get everything checked out.
Yep.
And just see, right?
Yeah. And it's pretty common thing, especially for women, once they're, start going through perimenopause and menopause, to have thyroid issues. So it's not uncommon to have some sort of a thyroid issue as you enter that stage in your life.
Yeah. And a lot of times when you get your blood work done, they're identifying, what's your T4 level, what's your T3 level. Most of the time T3 is the main focus, which is interesting, right? So, and we'll explain why. So when somebody's T3 is low, only about 20% of your T3 is coming directly from your thyroid. But 100% of the time we treat the thyroid. Right, that's what like a synthroid would be, is to treat the thyroid, and increase the number of, or the amount of T4 that you have. So very rarely nowadays does somebody give you, like a doctor prescribe a prescription that's going to give you T3. Instead, they give you a prescription like a synthroid that's going to increase. It's a dormant. It's T4, right? And T4 is just dormant. It's inactive thyroid, essentially. And your body takes T4 and converts it into T3. And that's what essentially you're using, is T3 to perform all those functions, right? Internally. So a lot of times what's important for somebody to understand is you could have plenty of T4, but your body's not doing a good job of converting that T4 into T3. And so when we're medicating for that, a lot of times majority of the time, it's just increasing the amount of T4 that you have. That doesn't necessarily address the issue that you're having in converting it to T3. It's just like, hey, we're going to bump this up so that by default you produce more T3, right? And you also have T1 and T2, which kind of makes sense since there's T3 and T4. T2 is responsible for kind of binding to T4 and turning into T3, right? So it like subtracts, and then that's how you essentially use your T3. So that's kind of the I guess anatomy and physiology lesson that's taking place. And so one element of that is for our listeners, I think it's important of, hey, what process is taking place? Like, where's the breakdown in converting the T4 to T3? I think that's the big issue that we should really be talking about. And then also there is what's called reverse T3. And reverse T3 is basically like anti-T3. It stops your body from using T3. And so I want to talk about these kind of two things, of one, converting T4 to T3, and then reverse T3. So reverse T3 first, right? Reverse T3 will prevent your body from using T3. T3 is really important for metabolic function. So they've done studies, when somebody fasts, their reverse T3 increases substantially, which is a survival mechanism by your body to say, hey, we need to slow our metabolism down. Let's increase our reverse T3 and let's block a bunch of metabolic functions in order to survive a longer period of time. So if somebody is not losing weight, right? This is why hormonally it does not make sense for you to reduce the amount of calories that you're eating. And it could be calories, it could just be nutrients. Like if you don't have a nutrient dense diet, then your reverse T3 is going to be high. Your metabolism's never going to function at a high rate, and you are not going to be able to lose weight. Your body is going to store body fat. Right. So that, I think that should be just a profound thing for people to understand of, hey, if you are going to reduce your calories way down, you have poor diet, or poor eating habits, you're skipping meals, your metabolism's not functioning. So it's not necessarily a thyroid problem, but your thyroid is preventing you from losing weight, but it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Right. It's going into like survival mode. Like, hey, we need to hold on to this body fat that we currently have. So we're going to slow everything down and protect that since it's not getting enough food.
Yeah. Your thyroid's regulating your metabolism. So why wouldn't it have a feature in there to say like, hey, let's slow things down. Let's live longer and not starve to death. Right. So I wanted to just address that first. Right. And then converting T4 to T3. And that's really like that process is where the mistakes, or I guess where that's really where the problem lies. And Kate, this is where I want to bring you into the conversation, because there are some really specific things that you can do to help that process, right? Make sure that's happening efficiently. You're converting T4 to T3 efficiently. And then there's some things that you can do that will cause problems in that area, right? So what would you say people should be doing in order to support that process?
Yep. So I'm going to say in order to support that process, obviously I'm going to say your big three. You got to get enough sleep, you got to get the right nutrition, and you got to be working out. I'm going to say that's going to be kind of a no-brainer. Thyroid or not, should be doing all three regardless. That's going to keep you healthy and prevent as much, I'm going to say, disease as possible long term. So stick to that. So then I'm going to say kind of getting into a little bit more of the nitty gritty. So when it comes to foods to avoid, so depending on how your blood work comes back, if you are already low on iodine, and then you, I'm going to say, consume foods like broccoli, your
cruciferous vegetables.
Your cruciferous vegetables. First time I've ever used that word, just so everyone knows. So I'm going to say any of those are actually going to end up making the issue worse long term. So this is going to be the one time I'm going to say stay away from your green vegetables if you're low on iodine and do have thyroid problems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Like that, I think that's something that I actually disagree with. I know that's the common belief. Yeah. But like, how many vegetables can somebody actually consume? You know, like, are you eating so much broccoli and so much spinach that like your iodine levels are like out of control? I don't know. I feel like it's just, I don't feel like you could eat enough. Maybe if you're juicing, right? Like if you're juicing, you could probably get it in high enough concentrates to then maybe like have a negative impact. I mean, I just don't like in terms of all the things that you can do. I would say avoiding green vegetables is probably not like the highest on the list.
So I'm going to say the reason that I kind of bring that one up, I'm going to say if you're either hypo or hyper, and I'm going to say you're already down that path, I'm going to say even if that thing of I'm going to say a cup of broccoli, let's say it's 1 cup of broccoli a day, I'm going to say that may be 0.5% worse for you.
Just eat some carrots
and
instead.
I'm gonna say I'd switch to carrots, and I'm gonna say that comes down to, I'm gonna say the real optimization on it, I guess. But I mean, I guess at the end of the day, like if I were in that situation, I'm gonna say running into thyroid problems, I'm gonna do literally everything to the T to optimize that. I'm gonna say fully, whether it's because don't get me wrong, green vegetables are great, but I'm gonna say at the same time, it's like, okay, like I got something that's going on, let's cut that for now.
Yeah. So what about you mentioned exercise, right? So exercise is obviously, it's probably the number one, like has the biggest impact on the list of things that you can do to support T4 to T3 conversion. So what does that look like for somebody in terms of like recommendations for exercise?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to say recommendations for exercise, because I'm going to say if you're already, I'm going to say having issues with the thyroid, you are coming from, I'm going to say typically a depressed situation. I'm going to say you're low on energy already, just not feeling, I'm going to say like your normal self. So what I'm going to say is start off slow, whether that's a 10-minute walk around the neighborhood, shoot, a 5-minute walk around the neighborhood. I'm going to say get yourself moving, jump in a pool, swim around. I'm going to say it won't put a hard impact on the body, but it's going to get you moving. Would be a great option as well. You can go into a gym, get yourself a personal trainer, come see me over at Legacy. We'll get you set up, and if you got thyroid, we'll get you right.
Yeah, I mean, exercise is so there's a fine line when it comes to your thyroid. Like you can overdo it, right? And that could suppress your ability to convert T4 to T3, but exercise probably has the biggest impact. And I remember this was maybe like 10 years ago. I remember this study they did with like Olympic athletes that were, like they would train for the Olympics, and then obviously like Olympic athletes retire pretty young because you have a limited window of being elite. And so these Olympic athletes would retire and they're like 30 years old, and they would have all of these like symptoms and issues coming up. And what they discovered is, oh, they've had this thyroid issue for 5 years, 6 years. They never experienced a single symptom from it because they were training so hard. It was like this giant Band-Aid that masked these issues. So the exercises, if you have a thyroid issue, like exercise is probably the number one thing that you should make sure that you're doing. You mentioned sleep, like absolutely. If you're in a sleep deficit or you have poor sleep hygiene, that has the opposite impact and will actually prevent your body from being able to convert T4 to T3, right? Brainy, what are some other things that would be issues and negatively impact that conversion?
Sleep for sure. Also stress management. So I know that so there's also been some studies around like high stress situations and how that can have a negative impact on the thyroid. So stress management, mindfulness, like whatever you need, whether it's a mindful practice, a breathing protocol that you practice, yoga, like just different things that you can use to manage your stress. That can be very helpful. And then also focusing on nutrition. I know we talked about nutrition a little bit. There is such a thing as an anti-inflammatory diet. And I know for some people, there are certain foods that can cause inflammation within the body, and that inflammation can trigger like a thyroid issue. So
inflammation is kind of like the culprit, right, for this poor conversion.
Yep.
Yeah.
So staying away from things like highly processed foods, foods that have high sugar, alcohol, things that just cause that inflammation within the body. And then there are certain things for some people that you mentioned before that may cause inflammation. So trying to figure out what those things are, and gluten is one that can really have a problem with people that are dealing with hypothyroidism and also Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune, your autoimmune system basically attacking the thyroid.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of environmental things as well that can create inflammatory responses, like microplastics,
Yes.
right? So like if you have a thyroid issue, never heat your food in plastic because that's just going to amplify the impact on your negative impact on your thyroid. Chlorine also has a, like, some people are more sensitive to chlorine than others, and if you have a thyroid issue, being exposed to chlorine, swimming in a pool or being in a hot tub that has like a high chlorine, or even just putting like a filter on your house for the water that's coming into your house. You think about like hot showers. You're taking a hot shower, which is opening up your pores. And then if you don't have a filter that's filtering out the chlorine, then it's just going straight into your bloodstream through your skin. Your skin's absorbing it like a sponge. That can cause issues. So there's a lot of different things.
Some cleaning supplies too. Like just be careful what you use.
Yeah. I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole with the environmental toxins and things, but like all of that stuff impacts your thyroid, which is really important, right? Because now we're learning, or hopefully the listeners are learning things we've known, but like how you feel and how your body functions, like the thyroid plays a very big role in that.
Yeah.
So there's one other thing that I want to mention as far as conversion of T4 to T3, and then we can talk about some things that can help boost thyroid function. But I guess this would be one, taking a methylated vitamin B, right? So about 20% of the population has this gene mutation of MTRR, which is your body's ability to methylate, and there's this process. Like I said only 20% of T3 is really like comes from the thyroid. Well, where's the other 80% coming from? Well, a lot of that process of taking T4, because T4 is just dormant floating around in your bloodstream. We can't use it until we convert it to T3. Well, that conversion process also has to do with your ability to methylate. So like a simple thing that you can do is take a methylated vitamin B to support that function. I would, if you're somebody that struggles, that would be probably the first thing I would do, right? From a standpoint, and fixing your sleep and exercising, right? So what else, Brandy?
From a nutrition standpoint, so nutrient-dense diet that includes things. So this is if you have hypothyroidism, an underactive thyroid. So iodine, if you're low in iodine, eating sea vegetables like kelp. Who doesn't love to eat kelp, right?
Yeah. I'm just gonna
or
take
you can get a supplement.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the supplement. I'm not sure about eating kelp.
There's also iodine, like in table salt. So I know sometimes too, people who are really like eating whole foods and being careful about sodium, sometimes they'll not have enough iodine in their system. So getting your iodine levels checked. You can also get iodine from some fish and dairy, eggs. Selenium is another supplement that you can either take a supplement or get the selenium from food. Brazil nuts is the highest has the highest density of selenium than any other food. So
Brazil nuts,
yes.
Yum. I don't know if I'd rather eat a Brazil nut or kelp.
Brazil nut with kelp.
Oh, there you go. See, you got a nice little
Mixed
dish.
in with some eggs.
I don't know. People, I just don't care for Brazil nuts. I don't think they're necessarily like distasteful, unlike kelp, which is yuck.
Other things, zinc, you mentioned B vitamins. So you can get zinc and vitamin B through eggs, green peas, turkey, asparagus, nuts, things like that. So all things to include in your diet.
Yeah. Awesome. So guys, exercise, get enough sleep, right? Take your vitamins, eat your vegetables, like all of those things.
Manage your stress.
Manage your stress. Avoid toxic chemicals. Probably pretty sound advice for everybody, right? But if you have a thyroid issue, I wouldn't necessarily say like even be upset about that. Be grateful that it's a symptom that you have that you can really address through lifestyle changes, and you can pretty much like even avoid having to take a synthetic thyroid T4 supplement or pharmaceutical just by fixing these things, right? So I'm not saying don't do that, but like, why wouldn't you fix these things anyway and then go get your thyroid tested after 3 months? And probably what's going to happen, what we see with clients is like, oh, you don't need as big of a dosage. Let's lower that. And then 3 months later, it's like, you don't really need as big of a dosage. Let's lower that. And then all of a sudden it's like, you don't really need the thyroid. Everything looks really, really good. Like, why wouldn't you do that, right? So, or address it before you ever even have an issue,
Yeah.
or some other issue that comes up because your lifestyle's not healthy. So that's it, guys. For if you're struggling with your thyroid, come and talk to us. We've got pretty good plan to address that, and strategies and things that you should be doing. So come and talk to us. We're happy to put you on the right path. That's it. We'll be back next week with more great stuff. Thank you so much for listening to the Healthy Living Scottsdale podcast. Do you have a question that you'd like for us to answer live on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone and do 3 simple things. First, leave us a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. In that review, ask anything you want related to health, fitness, or nutrition. And if you want a shout out, leave us your Instagram handle or name. That's all you have to do. Then listen to hear your questions answered live on the next Q&A episode.